Well, hi there, I'm Noah Bradley. This is Handmade House TV. And on this week's episode, we're going to talk about how wide your logs should be that you use when building your log cabin. So stay tuned. Well, all right, today we're going to talk about the logs you use for your future log cabin. It's a question I get a whole lot, is how wide the logs should be that people have. They have trees on their land, or they're asking a logger to supply them with the logs that they will use in order to build their log cabin, and they want me to tell them how big should the logs will be. And so I thought I'd create a video in order to answer that question today. And first of all, the general rule is that the wider the logs, the better the logs. And when we're talking about width, I'm not talking about depth as far as how thick your walls are. I'm talking about how tall your logs are. That would be how wide the logs are. And of course, we're always talking about the traditional method of building a log cabin, where the inside and outside faces of the logs are either hewn with an axe or sawn with a saw. And when we're talking about this, we always want to make sure that we're talking about the face of the log and not the diameter of the log. The diameter of the log would be from the top curved part, natural curved part of the log, to the bottom of the curve. In other words, the girth of the tree itself, that would be the diameter of the log. But when I refer to logs, I typically talk about the face, that part that we see of our logs, the actual cut or hewn surface of it. And the absolute smallest logs that I like to see, the smallest log on the smallest end of that log, the most attractive log cabins that I've seen throughout my career, you want that face to be 10 inches. And what does that mean as far as the diameter of the log when you're looking for the log? Well, it depends upon how thick you're going with the log as far as that goes. And best guess would probably be maybe 14 inches. So the diameter of your log for your logs, for your log home, the smallest end of the smallest log would be 14-inch diameter to it, from one side of the log to the other side of the log. And that means when you sawed it down, you'd probably end up with a 10-inch face on it. And it sounds big, and it needs to be big. I have never once seen a log cabin where I thought the logs were too big, but I have seen many cases where I thought that they were too small. Now, can you get away with smaller logs than what I'm just mentioning? On this little log cabin over here that I built as an outbuilding, that the smallest logs on it are 10 inches, and the largest ones are nearly 2 feet. And so even on such a small structure, I chose to go with wider logs. There are advantages other than aesthetics when it comes to putting your log cabin up, and that is the wider your log, the faster it goes up, the less number of logs that you'll need in order to build your log cabin. Please do not ask me how many logs you need. You need to design your log cabin, and then once you've designed it and you know what size logs you're going to need, then it's an easy little solution in order to figure out your own how many logs you will need. Always order more logs than what you will need so that you have spares in case you make mistakes. And also you get to choose the premium. Typically when you're building a log cabin, you will pick the best log possible. And so when it gets down to you're putting the last log on the log cabin, you don't want to choose the ugliest log that you had in the whole stack. Ideally, the ugliest one you won't use. So that way you're always using a premium selection of the best logs possible when building your home. So always get plenty of extras, and order them in extra lengths as well, so you can cut off some of the checked wood in the ends. So I think I pretty well covered that. And also, so you can get away. It depends upon the size of your cabin as far as the size. The larger your log home is, the larger you want your logs. And the smaller the log cabin that you're building, the more you can get away with smaller ones, but you don't really have to do that. Also keep in mind that the larger your logs are, the heavier your logs are, and you will notice that. But don't fret too much about how much your logs weigh. Some way, somehow or another, you get one log at a time into place, and it's done before you know it. Typically, when I build a log cabin, I'll get the logs up in less than 2 weeks' time, and it typically takes me 6 months to over a year to build the cabin. So the logs are a small part of it. You want to use the best logs you absolutely can. You want to use the biggest logs you possibly can, and you want to really do it right as much as you can. But keep in mind that there's a lot more to log cabins than just the logs. And one final thought that I could relay to you, and that is that people ask me what the ideal thickness of a log is, and it varies. It varies somewhere between an absolute minimum is about 3.5 inches. That's really getting pretty thin. It's getting up to where you call yourself a plank house, and the absolute maximum is probably 7.5 inches. I don't want to really say 8. That's absurd. The vast majority of historic log homes that you'll see out there are generally around 6, maybe a hair over 6, 6.25, 6.5. When you get into barns, that's when you might get the 7s, maybe 7.5, but that's about it. But the thing that you really want to avoid in getting your logs is, first of all, you never want to cut away the natural contours of the top and the bottom of the log. You want to hew or saw your faces inside and out. But one thing you don't want to do, you don't want to square your logs up, but you really don't want square. It's extremely important that that your logs look much taller than they are wide. The worst looking log cabins in the world are ones that are so beefy that they look kind of square in the ends. That you want tallness, and you want a proportion. So if you go with logs as narrow as 4, you don't have to go that wide as far as the top goes. So a lot of times when people are telling me how best to size the logs for their particular cabin, it starts out with how big of a log cabin you want, how wide your logs are, and a lot of times that will tell you how thick your logs should be. Of course, Mr. Code Man is going to want you to have R value in the log, and that depends a lot upon the species you choose. It's easy to do a Google search and find out what the R value is per inch on particular species. But typically I recommend, if I had to give you an ultimate in order to wrap this video up today, you probably want to shoot for logs that are 6 inches thick, and you want to shoot for logs that are at minimum 10 inches on the smallest end of the smallest log. Ideally, the averaging faces of 14 inches is probably the most attractive log cabin you can possibly build. One that you'll love building, take great pride in, will last you for centuries. Anyway, you guys take care. If you want to know all about building log cabins, if you want to step by step, you can't beat the Log Cabin Academy course. It's 8 hours long of me going step by step how to get the best log cabin possible. Over at Handmade Houses right now, for a limited time, I got the log cabin bundle going on, where you get free set of plans that I've drawn for a log cabin, so you can see how I draw them, plus the Stonemason Academy, because log cabins and stonework go together so well, plus the Chinking Academy, how to properly chink a log cabin, all in an extremely affordable little bundle. Or you might even want to consider, just for a little bit more, to go ahead and sign up for the Handmade House Guild, where you get everything I've ever put together, all together, like 40 hours worth of videos over there. So anyway, thank you guys for signing in. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your likes. Please consider coming over to Handmade Houses and join us in the Handmade House Guild. And that's it for this week. You guys take care. I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. And we'll talk again here on Handmade House TV next week. Bye now.